the board meeting of NHS Direct and NHS Trust. We're kicking off now, which is just after 1 o'clock. We are kicking off in the afternoon because we reorganised our day so that the morning was spent on a steering group for our future programme. Just to let everybody know that we've got a nurse on site who's giving flu vaccinations, and therefore during the proceedings this afternoon, individuals will be coming in and out to have their vaccinations. And the reason that we're doing this is to enable members of the board to have vaccinations because we are, as an organisation, committed to the health of our workforce. We want to encourage as many people as possible to have flu vaccinations so that a smaller number of our staff suffer from the flu this winter as possible, and that includes ourselves, and so that we're able to sustain an effective service and minimise our sickness absence due to flu, which is of course a very common reason for people being off during the winter period. So we're very committed to the health of our workforce. We want to enable as many people as possible to protect themselves from flu, and we want to protect our service and the public whom we serve from flu by providing a constant, continuous high level of access through the winter months. So that's why we're having flu jabs today. Okay, so moving into the business of the board. First thing is apologies for absence. Peter Catchpole isn't able to be with us this afternoon due to another important and long-standing appointment with somebody very senior in the government, I believe. What to do with us. We haven't had any declarations of interest for today's agenda. If anybody would like to make a declaration now or at any point in the agenda, they're very welcome to. Nothing now? Very good. We are, as usual, being broadcast via the internet live. I'd like to encourage anyone who's watching this live, please, to fill in an evaluation form. This is a relatively new thing. We've been doing it for just over a year now, and we're constantly looking for ways to improve the quality of the experience of people who are trying to follow our meeting on the web. So please do fill in an evaluation form when you've finished. If there's nothing else in terms of preamble, shall we just move on then to the minutes of the annual general meeting, which we had last time we met, and the board meeting, which were both held on the 25th of July. Okay, are there any matters of accuracy in relation to the minutes? Trevor?
In terms of the board meeting, Chair, I've suggested a slight rewording to paragraph 9.5 on page 4 of 8.
Yes.
To reflect more clearly the remit of the Finance Committee and its relationship to the board.
Do you want to read that out?
I'm happy to. It's the final part of that sentence. I would like to say it should be reworded to more clearly define its remit, as the Finance Committee does not absolve the Trust Board of its financial duties, nor the Audit Committee in terms of its financial governance and internal control.
That sounds fine to me. Is everybody happy with that amended wording? Okay, Tim, you are?
Yes, thank you very much.
Great. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Shall we move on then to the specifically? Have we approved? We're able to approve the minutes for the 25th, and also, if there aren't any comments, the board's approving the minutes of the AGM. It is. That's fine. Approved. Thank you very much, everyone. Let's go on to the action log.
I think there's just one item which is flagged for this meeting, which Roger can update us in terms of the planned date for a board seminar on the consultation.
Yes, we originally were going to have a board seminar in the first 2 weeks of October on Our Future consultation. But we agreed at the end of last week that we should extend the period of consultation, more than anything because of the seriousness of it, that we really wanted to give ourselves and our staff the opportunity to have as much engagement on the consultation as possible. So we've decided to extend the consultation from the 18th of October to the 8th of November. So it's our proposal to reconvene a seminar towards the end of that period of consultation, rather than have it in the first 2 weeks of October.
So,
in practical terms, we don't have an agreed board date for a seminar. Okay. It's the 25th of November. So actually what we will do, because that would really not be, that's the Friday before the November board date on the Monday. wouldn't give enough time, and therefore ideally it'd be best to have a board seminar probably in the second week of November, but with your approval, we'd canvass a suitable date outside of the meeting.
Yeah, please do that, and please do it as soon as possible, because obviously the quicker you canvass the date, the more people will attend. Although, as usual, presumably there will be the facility for people to attend by telephone.
Yes,
Yeah.
we'll
Okay.
arrange that.
That's really important, so let's move with that as quickly as we can. Is there anything else on the action log?
Nope, that's it as far as...
Are there any other questions on the action log? Comments, questions? No. Okay. Well, generally, the next thing on our agenda is Chair's recent engagements, and I took it off the agenda last time on the mistaken assumption that I wouldn't have had many engagements to share with you, but of course that did turn out to be mistaken, and there's really quite a long list, of which I would highlight just a couple, really. One was an interesting seminar by David Nicholson with the King's Fund, NED's non-executive board leadership group, which is always interesting. They're very good at attracting interesting speakers and being able to debate important issues. So there was one with David Nicholson on the 6th of September, and then there was another one which I chaired on the 15th of September with Matthew Cook, who was the National Clinical Director on of emergency care, as well as being an A&E consultant and a professor of emergency care. And both of those gave a very clear feeling of how much pressure there is in the NHS overall, and also left me with a feeling that 111 is relatively low on the agenda, although once people really grasp its significance, they realise how important it is. And there was a strong sense amongst the London non-executive director group who were there to listen to Matthew Cook that they hadn't really heard enough about 111 and they wanted to hear more, which is interesting. One other thing which Nick and I did together, which was to meet with the Ambulance Trust Chairs and Chief Executives group, which was, as you can imagine, an interesting opportunity to share different perspectives on 111 and was very valuable. The one thing I would take back from that, amongst a number of very interesting issues that we discussed, was that the multi-channel nature of current demand, i.e. the fact that we take more than half of our interactions with members of the public online through the web and the app, was something that the ambulance community was very struck by and very interested in. And of course it has an enormous bearing on what the demand is going to be for 111. So that was interesting. Nick, I don't know if you want to say anything more about that particular event.
I think there was a shared view, firstly, that 111 could be superb both for patients and for the NHS, superb opportunity, but also concerns at this stage over some important issues where there was a great deal of uncertainty about how things are going to be taken forward. And even though potentially we are both competitors and collaborators together in that room, there was a shared view that there were issues of mutual concern about how 111 might be taken forward that wouldn't fulfil the vision. And there was a commitment on behalf of that joint ambulance trusts and chief execs group and ourselves to try and engage senior policy officials and departmental officials to share some of those concerns.
Okay, thanks, Nick. One other thing I just wanted to mention was that we had a question from one of our public members. So as you know, NHS Direct has around 20,000 public members, and somebody made an interesting point to us that she felt that in her area not enough people knew about NHS Direct's telephone service and were not therefore using it to its maximum potential. And she asked us what we did to make sure that there was a high level of awareness of the NHS Direct service, particularly in the out of hours period locally. It's a very interesting question. Of course, that's mostly something that we don't do on our own, but we do it in partnership with local primary care trusts. But it was interesting that somebody who was both a member of ours and a member of their own surgery patients group was saying to us, well, we think it's a very important service and not enough people know about it. So that was a very good, powerful point. Okay, Shall we then move on into the performance section of the agenda and straight on to Nick, your Chief Executive's report?
Okay, I'll be relatively quick. We're up for another award. We have a cupboard full of, a shelf full of awards, and we'll see whether, I think it's in October, Renette, isn't it? The eHealth Insider Award, actually relating to our ability to reach out and meet patient needs through the internet. So that will be, we'll wait to see what happens. A number of us have been involved in the long service and values recognition award meetings. 3 of them have been held, finishing last week. Speaking for 2 of those, or speaking for myself, I went to 2 of those. I wasn't able to go to the 3rd because we were at the Ambulance Trust meeting, and I found them to be actually very uplifting. Great deal of commitment and loyalty from staff, and I thought the Values Recognition Awards really hit the spot. The look of pride on the faces of the people who had been nominated and selected by their peers for outstanding performance, not by a manager but by their peers, was phenomenal, and I think is something that we should certainly carry on with. So others that were at those meetings might also want to say a word or two. I don't know.
Yeah, that would be a good moment. I thought we might, my expectations, we might cover that, or that non-executives might want to talk about it in relation to engagement visits, but let's bring that forward.
Okay.
And no, it's good, it's better. So, Renette.
I was at all 3, and I wanted to also commend Tricia actually, because she did Nick's part. She did the
henceforth known as Tricia's part.
Tricia's part, yes, for Tricia's part in the events. Because I think she did a fantastic job in being there for you, Nick, when you weren't able to do the lead off, which then led to, I think, the good decision for Tricia
to carry on.
All 3. Yeah. So I thought that was good, and I'd also like to recognise the contribution from Louisa and Trevor in giving the values discussions, because actually from both your presentations, it led me to think about the values in a different way personally. So I'm grateful for that. And also from an engagement perspective, I did try and get around a few members of staff, and I know they greatly value the time that they get to spend with their colleagues and the time that they get to spend thinking about the journey that they've come within the organisation, but also the journey that's ahead of them. And I think those events were very well organised by our colleague Jodie and her team in making sure that they were done well.
Well, I was at the London one. I am also delighted that we're able to recognise not just long service, but specific special contributions along the lines of our values, and it seems to me that that's something that it's really important to place emphasis on, and possibly more emphasis going forward. So that was great. I also thought you did a great job, Tricia.
Thanks, Joanne. The staff did thoroughly enjoy the day. They valued us actually spending time out and recognising their either long service awards or the value recognition. They all found it really motivating, and when some of them actually went out of the way to come and say to myself, to Renette, you know, this time invested in us is really appreciated. So it was, all 3 events were really good.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to echo that from my point of view, and I think you don't often get organisations, particularly in the NHS, that make such that make a big deal of, you've been with us for 10 years. Well, I know that sort of per se may not be, a mark of achievement. You'd hope that in an organisation that manages its staff well and its performance well, that those people who are there for 10 years would be people that we'd want to be there for 10 years. And certainly the ones that I spoke to, I felt were the very sort of best of NHS Direct. And I was very struck by just how much they loved the day. It was such a great day. The atmosphere was great, and I think mixing it in with the values then sort of lifts it another sort of level. But I thought it was great, and I thought, you gave a fantastic speech. It's a very, very good day. And there was wine, which was in moderation.
Which staff bought themselves.
Which the staff bought themselves.
Yeah.
But I thought also just made it sort of, that there was that opportunity, just made it a special sort of celebration.
Very good. Okay, Nick, back to you.
Right, so I'm moving from that uplifting to the board assurance framework. Equally uplifting. This tracks the assurance that the board can have in us pursuing our strategic objectives. This is the first time we've presented this format of board assurance to the board. So I'm very pleased to hear any feedback either within the meeting or outside as to whether you feel it gives you the kind of information, it gives us the kind of information that we need. We bring it here on a bi-monthly basis, in other words, every other month, not twice a month. Yeah.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
So I'm happy to take any comments outside or questions now. No, I'll not tempt fate and move further on. Our future workforce staff consultation, we talked about the board seminar. There are a series of meetings, around 30, that are happening from tomorrow onwards, and at each of those there will be present an executive director. On quite a few there will be a non-executive director, and there will also be an operational team who are involved in the day-to-day mechanics of the individual consultation meetings, who will present the detailed proposals vis-a-vis the changes that are proposed to the staff in each of the meetings. So we'll be in a position to report back on those at our next meeting, and the outcome of those meetings will certainly be reflected in the board seminar towards the end of the consultation to enable us to take a fully informed decision by the end of November. There will be, I am sure, a great deal of staff comment, as what we are consulting about changing is pretty fundamental to all of the day-to-day work that our frontline staff perform. So I expect those meetings to be very active, and for us to need to do a lot of hard listening rather than a huge amount of hard telling. But there is a selling job to be done, which is making sure that our staff understand the context in which these consultations and these proposals are being taken forward. So I'm hoping that at those meetings we'll be able to get those messages across reasonably succinctly. So,
and we're hoping that non-executives will be involved in many of those meetings.
Yes, they are. They've been programmed in.
Yeah.
Do we know how much response there's been from non-execs? Because I know that I haven't replied.
I don't have that at my fingertips.
We just have 2 or 3 meetings where we don't have a presence, so if there is the opportunity for colleagues to...
Could you just send those out, those final
that
meetings that aren't yet covered?
Okay.
And Chair, just to let colleagues also know, I'll send a briefing sheet out along with the original proposal and original staff consultation document and the presentation that will be undertaken at those meetings, so that you've got a good sense of the context.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
The first meetings are tomorrow.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Nick, we're also proposing webinars, aren't we? Because obviously, even if we get to every site, we won't get to every person because of the nature of the shift work that our staff are asked to do. Nick, we're offering people an opportunity to engage and ask questions in a slightly different way in addition to the face-to-face meetings, is that right?
The webinars will be towards the end of the process.
Yeah. And also everyone who would like one is being offered an opportunity of a one-to-one.
A one-to-one, which is obviously critically important that people have the opportunity to do that.
Okay.
Okay, very good.
Fifth item is just simply to report the clustering of SHAs. The importance of this item is that I can now also report that Robert Harris, who's been the Director of Commissioning at the East of England SHA, has been appointed as the Operations Director for the new Midlands and East Cluster, and Robert was able to confirm with me that they will continue to be our point of reference as far as the contract for 12-13 is concerned. So in amongst the uncertainty because of the changes in commissioning arrangements, it's good to know that there will be, touch wood, barring accidents, and there will be no change in our in the lead person as far as our commissioning of our contract is concerned.
Yes.
I'm sorry about the touch wood, Robert, if
Or
you're
those
watching.
or the sorts of accidents that you.
Okay.
That's good news.
Yeah.
And then the final item, I just wanted to reflect that since we last met, of course, Renette sadly has decided that she will be moving on after 4.5 very, very successful years here at NHS Direct. And whilst I would dearly love to be able to change her view of her life plan, that is her business and not mine, so I can't do that. And Renette will leave the organisation at the end of November, and certainly goes with my personal very, very best wishes.
Yeah, I'm sure we all echo that, and there'll be opportunities to recognise your contribution to the organisation near the time.
And further embarrass, hopefully. Okay, here, that's the end of my report.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Nick? No? Okay. Thank you, everyone. Let's then move along to the performance package, which, as usual, I guess will be introduced by Trevor.
We will. Thanks, Chair. I'll take give you the headlines for papers 6.1 to 6.2 together. Our core service volumes for our 0845 and urgent care services remained around 8% below plan for the month, with 386,000 users of the service in August. In addition to that, we also had 439,000 uses of our health and symptom checkers over the internet. Our service performance improved through the month, and we actually achieved our lowest level of performance penalties during the course of August. So our best performance this year so far. Our challenge now is to ensure those improvements are sustained and to work towards embedding them across the remainder of this year. Our financial performance remains strong. We are currently completing our mid-year review and year-end forecasts. Initial indications from those forecasts are that we remain on target to achieve our planned surplus for the year. However, there are clearly a number of financial risks and pressures that will need some very careful managing throughout the remainder of the year to make sure that we do deliver that position at year-end.
Thanks, Trevor. So I guess a continuation of the picture, really. Financially quite secure for this year, which is something the execs should be commended about, and operationally continuing to be quite challenged. I'm looking at Keith Gate while I say that. I'm sure colleagues will have comments and questions about our performance. Trevor, thank you.
Could I ask whether it's the penultimate bullet point in the summary where you say, Trevor, that there's the number of new 111 calls in the pilots is 7 times the decline in 0845. Could I ask whether that was in line with our expectation?
The fall off in 0845 calls is lower than anticipated, Trevor, so that's a lower number than had been planned.
So I suppose what that reflects is the uncertainty around 111, the fact that it's a new service and actually nobody really knows how the pattern of demand is going to fall out. Ruth, what's your view?
I think it also depends on how much the GP out of hours calls have been put through 111 and had, so 111 has become the local brand for urgent care in hours or out of hours. I know in the northeast, where we have seen about a 45% decline in 0845 volumes, they have been more active in terms of advertising and awareness, and it's more an integral part of their urgent care system. So I think what we're seeing is direct impact of commissioners' actions locally.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Any other questions on the corporate performance package? Trevor, do you want to say anything about finance separately?
I guess the only point to add is that we are bringing together those financial forecasts and identification of the risks and pressures, and we will report more fully on them in the month 6 report as part of that mid-year review.
Okay, thank you. Right then. We can move on into the strategy section of the agenda today. Renette is going to talk to us about the information standard.
Yes.
and ask us to make a decision.
Yes, there's a decision there to be made. So hopefully colleagues have seen the paper. So the information standard accreditation is something that the DH set up in 2008, and the team have been working to make sure that we have the right. What the standard looks at is not the information that we produce, and this is across all formats, whether it's the information that we use on our website, whether it's the information that we use in order to support our clinical decision-making system, etc. as well. But they, in achieving the standard, we get the equivalent of a kite mark that we can then use on our website and in any NHS Direct material to say that we have the processes and the procedures that deem us to be a good quality information provider that patients and the public can trust. So the team have been working away on this. We have had a review by the Royal Society for Public Health, who we selected as the reviewing body, and we expect to hear in the next couple of weeks as whether what any feedback we've got from that particular review. As part of receiving the standard, we need to make a public declaration as a board that the organisation is committed to maintain and improve the information production systems and the quality of the information that we produce as per Annex A. So if the board is content to do so, this would be the right time to either raise any questions with me or for us to formally declare that we are committed to the 5 sub-clauses of the information standard.
Is everybody happy to do that? Okay, we're subject to the grammar police.
Oh gosh.
Sorting out point C. I'm happy to go along with that. And that's approved.
Okay.
Well, there's just one point I want to make, and that is that it didn't have evidence-based. And I think producing good quality information is great, but actually I think that it's important that we say that it's evidence-based information, because good quality can be opinion, good opinion, and I think that the standard now in information is evidence-based.
I think that's very good catch. Yeah. So can I make a suggestion then that in Appendix A, the policy statement that we adopt as NHS Direct, and we therefore go over and above that which the information standard requires, is to add is evidence-based to sub-clause A. Or do you think it's worthy of a declaration more broader than that?
Yeah. What do you mean more broader?
As in something by itself. So
I think the standard. Sorry, the standard defines good quality as including evidence-based.
Yeah, but it's not explicit.
It's not explicit in the.
Explicit.
Yeah,
I think good quality used to be, who says it's good quality?
Hang on a minute. So let's have everybody have their say, and then we'll discuss it. Tim.
I support the idea of evidence-based information wherever that is available, but there are some things we're asked for where there is not the evidence base or not strong enough evidence base, and where good quality opinion is all that we can offer. And I think that we shouldn't not offer information simply because the evidence base doesn't exist if there is a body of opinion which supports a particular point of view. And so I would be uncomfortable in having evidence base made explicit in this particular statement.
What I would suggest, therefore, they're nice would talk about different types of evidence having different quality. So they would say that where there isn't randomised clinical trial data, that expert opinion constitutes evidence of its own kind. So I would like to suggest, following Louisa's point, that we do talk about evidence-based, and we do it in a way that doesn't suggest that everything that we do has a robust clinical data behind it.
And actually, Brian's right. It does in the bullet points under the standard defines quality information as it does say evidence-based. In the standard, I just think it should be explicit.
Well, what I'm hearing, contradict me if you dare, is that the board is comfortable signing off a declaration about the quality of the information that we provide the public and that underpins the advice that we give to the public, and we may want to just refine the wording very slightly, which I'm sure, Renette, you and your team can do, but the board is very content to sign up to that principle, however slightly differently it might be expressed. Okay, fine.
Sounds like a very good summary, Chair.
Fine. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Renette. That's great, and thanks to the team also who have done the work on the processes and systems that underpin our information that I know is quite onerous. Very good. Now we are. The next thing on our agenda is Foundation Trust, but unfortunately we are missing our chief executive, who's having his blue chair at the moment. So I'm going to suggest we return to that. So we structure our agenda very slightly to cover the governance report and to cover. So we go into the governance section of our agenda to talk about the governance report and the various oral and written reports from our committees. Keisha, governance report. We just have to note this, presumably.
Yes. There are no uses of the trust seal, and it's just to note a declaration on Joanne's appointment as non-executive governor of Nuffield County.
Fine. Thank you. We go into our committee business. So we're due, I think, a verbal report, Sue, from the Clinical Governance Committee meeting of the 9th of September and the teleconference that was held on the 13th. You had a busy time there, didn't you?
Just some of the highlights. We received an update on the NHS assessment process for level 1. That's been deferred now until May of next year to give us time to address the procedural and documentation issues that have been identified as part of the pre-assessment. And we were given a plan to demonstrate that we could actually address the issues that have been raised, including some of the individuals involved receiving training, and that all seemed to support the view that we should be in a good position by May when the assessment happens. Always recognising that given that the organisation is going through transition, there will need to be management focus on making sure that we do achieve this level 1. We received the Clinical Governance Quarterly Report and, as usual, focused on the KPIs, 2 in particular, as usual, which is the statutory training and the call review percentages. Both are still red, but both are going in the right direction, and certainly the call review is on track to meet the trajectory of achieving 80% by November. So as long as we keep going in that direction, then we should hopefully start to see that red on the scorecard changing colour. We also looked at the clinical risk register in some detail, and we reviewed the patient satisfaction reports that came through. We have a look at serious incident reviews. We receive a 6-monthly report on very serious incidents, and although individually we look at the review, each incident in detail, actually we felt that when you put them together and look at them as a whole, you actually see trends and themes that you might not see if you look on them on an individual basis, and that quite clearly demonstrated that we are learning from the incidents and making sure that we put in place remedial action where necessary. And then finally we looked, as part of the teleconference call, on the 2 service quality reviews, one for West Yorkshire and one for health information. The West Yorkshire report is coming to the board later on. The health information report will be coming to the next board in combination with a second report that I believe Ruth is putting together, which also looks at health information in 111 terms. And it seemed sensible to keep those 2 reports together rather than separating them.
Very good. And you have your Clinical Governance Committee plan for the year going forward.
We just have a plan which is for information purposes, but if anybody has any questions on that, then we can deal with that.
Thank you, Sue. I mean, it is great to be able to look at that plan. It's vital, it is paramount that we continue to focus on clinical governance during this transitional stage of the service as 111 comes on stream. It's very reassuring to see the continued focus on clinical governance and the energy and effort and sustained focus that's being placed on clinical governance. So I think that's just excellent. Does anybody have any questions for Sue or for Tricia as clinical director on anything that the clinical governance committee's been up to? No, that's fine, thank you then. What I suggest is, Nick, we deferred the discussion on Foundation Trust, that's fine. You okay?
Yeah.
Feeling all right?
Oh, yes.
We deferred the Foundation Trust discussion until you return. So let's continue with the committee business and then go back to Foundation Trust. So the next committee whose work featured on our agenda is the Finance Committee. Tim, we've got some minutes and also some verbal reports from you, I think.
Yes, you have. The minutes, we had a verbal report on the minutes are in fact from July, so I won't look at those again. We had two extraordinary, well, they're all extraordinary actually.
I don't know if that's good.
In the first, we had a good look at the change programme, the future programme, from a programme management point of view and looking at the cost of the programme. And we looked into that with some scrutiny, and I think we can report to the board that although there were one or two slippages, it was basically all in order. So our costs on the improvement programme are where they should be. I also brought with me the certificate that I have got for the introduction to NHS finance course.
Did you get a badge as well?
No, I'm afraid not, no badge, but I only got 83%, I might add, which was. However, we are recommending that it's quite a good course. It's e-learning, it takes a short time, but it does give a good introduction to a lot of the terminology that are, if I can say, peculiar to NHS finances. And we did recommend that all board members and certainly all members of the Finance Committee went through that. So I just thought I'd bring my certificate to show you.
Is that going to be, presumably that's a link to a package, is that going to be sent around to the board?
It can all be done through Emma, who will manage it for us, won't she, Trevor?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, good. Any questions for Tim? Or any other members of the Finance Committee? No? Okay, let's move on then to the Audit Committee. Trevor, are you happy to take that?
Yeah, I am. Chair, I think we've given a verbal update previously on these minutes. It is just to say they are as long as substantial because that was the sort of scale of the agenda. It was both the year-end closure meeting with the final accounts and the review of those accounts, but also we presented the New Year plans of audit activities. And what we will be doing is actually rescheduling the agenda next time round to make sure there's a better balance across that and the preceding and subsequent audit committees.
Thanks very much, Trevor. I personally, to my astonishment, found them a really gripping read. I thought they were very well put together, very readable, very clear. So I think whoever writes those minutes should be commended. I wondered whether there's mention of a counter-fraud DVD, an animated DVD even, 5.3.3. I wonder if that can be made available to board members who are interested, just to see that.
Certainly.
Thank you. Steve.
I just have one question on 513, which is internal audit conclusions. The majority seem to give substantial assurance to the audit, but sickness absence is adequate assurance. What was the difference between adequate assurance and substantial assurance? Because I would think, given our history on this, we would like substantial assurance.
Overall, it relates to the number of recommendations that have been produced within the report, the numbers of potential or actual weaknesses in the systems of control that have been identified, number of recommendations to actually make those improvements, and whether they are of a low, medium or a higher priority. So that's the basis upon which our internal auditors come to those conclusions. What we do have is a full set of management responses to those recommendations with defined action plans, deadline dates, and we do subsequent follow-up reviews by our internal audit and also we have a recommendation tracker system to make sure those recommendations are put through. So that work is underway, and we have an action plan that is being worked to, and I think the majority of those recommendations has actually been put through and actioned, but they will be assessed and tested as part of the follow-up review.
And you'll see that report going to the next audit committee in October.
Thank you, Roger. Nick?
I was just going to point out the time lag, which is that audit would have taken place during 2010, and therefore this is not a report that has just been produced on what our current practice is now. So, as you know, the board had a seminar on, in-depth seminar on the subject of sickness management. So, this is a historic position that's being reported here.
Okay, so if there aren't any more questions on the audit committee minutes, I'd like to thank you for those, and we will move back in our agenda to the final item on the strategy section, which is Foundation Trust. And before we just kick that off, I just wanted to check whether there's anybody around the table who is still hoping to have a flu jab who hasn't had one yet. Are they? Do you know if they've? Is there somebody out there?
Susan.
Oh, Susan. Okay, fine. So we still have our process running through. Excellent. That's very good. Nick, Foundation Trust.
I'll say a very short introduction and then pass over to Trevor, who, together with Helen, has been doing the detailed work on this. This is a really important document.
This is the one that was sent around our second dispatch.
Yes.
Okay.
It's on the table, was it?
Does everybody have this? So the reason why this paper came around in a second dispatch is that we, as the name would suggest, there are three parties involved in this discussion. The first is ourselves. The second is the Department of Health, and specifically the provider development arm of the department. So Ian Dalton's section of the department. And the third is the East of England, acting in this instance as our main commissioner. And this document has been doing the rounds between those three parties to try and nail down the final wording for, well, since the beginning of September. You'll recall the Secretary of State wrote to you, Joanne, back in August and invited us to partake in this process and to reach agreement. It reflects the view of the board, which we previously debated, that becoming a foundation trust provides for our best legal form going forward in the interests of the patients that we serve. This document introduces a timetable which we will be performance managed against, that would see us submitting our application to the Secretary of State for approval in October 2012. So I've probably stolen all of Trevor's thunder, but I'll pass over to Trevor at this point to add any further points.
I'd probably say 90%.
Okay.
Apologies. A key step to achieving Foundation Trust status is for all NHS trusts to sign a tripartite formal agreement with the Department of Health and their Strategic Health Authority. It is a public record. It outlines the key progress, milestones and actions that each organisation has agreed to take to become a Foundation Trust. It will be published on our website once it's signed by all parties, and it has been developed through a series of meetings and communications with the relevant organisations. And I would like to express my thanks to Helen and Christina for the work they've done in bringing this through and developing the TFA and getting us into a position to sign it with the Department of Health. We anticipate the agreement being signed by the deadline date of the 30th of September, and it is setting a very clear intent of submitting our Foundation Trust application to the Department of Health on the 1st of October 2012. The board are asked to agree our tripartite agreement.
Does any member of the board want to ask any questions about the tripartite agreement as it stands at the moment? No, is the board content to give its approval and our sign off to our part of it? Yep.
There may be some minor wording changes as we weren't able to nail down the final DH and East of England sign-off processes. So assuming that the board would be content for me to sign those minor pieces off.
Is the board content to leave that in Nick's capable hands? To give us the final wording?
Yes.
Very good, thank you. I think we're approved. Let's now, is the board happy to carry on? Does anybody want a break now? No? Happy to keep marching on. Good. Let's then go to any other feedback on trust board engagement visits. So these are when the board members are out and about talking to frontline staff on the whole. We've talked a bit already about the 10-year service awards and values awards events, which sounds as though were hugely successful. Are there any other engagement visits that people would like to report back on? No? Okay, fine. Then let's move on to the board call recording item. So, as members of the board will know, every month we circulate an encrypted CD of recordings of interactions, real live interactions between our staff, our frontline staff and members of the public. We have a programme of topics so that we cover off all of our major services in a planned way over the year. And this month we listened to call recordings for health information inquiries, and we also had a couple of web chat texts for, as in the wording of what went through on 2 web chats from members of the public and members of our staff who had members of the public who had health information inquiries. Tricia, what would you like to say about these before we open it up for discussion?
I hope everybody's had the opportunity to listen to the recordings. I know some were in early this morning doing that, which I appreciate.
Is anybody who hasn't managed to? Louisa?
No, because I normally come in early, but you and Peter Catchpole were at my station.
We might want to re-look at the arrangements for listening to CVs on site.
Okay. And we did time the health information calls with a view to the service quality review paper, so if board members can keep this in their memory bank for next month, that would be appreciated. But the calls, the telephone calls, particularly the first one related to a gentleman who was seeking screening for bowel cancer, and the second call was a lady who had an inquiry regarding shingles, and her employer had concerns in her workplace. And I think it's fair to say they are a reasonably typical example of health information calls to our service. And I'm happy to take questions on that. And as Chair quite rightly pointed out, there are 2 web encounters on the following pages which are self-explanatory regarding emergency contraception, and the other one's completely left my memory bank. Yeah, both are. That's why it's left my memory bank. So I'm happy to take comments and questions from board members.
Okay. Would anyone like to kick off? If you wouldn't, I will. Trevor, Tim, Trevor, Tim, Alan, Nick, me.
I thought for the 3rd and 4th call, the calls related to the shingles question were very good. I thought very professional, very prompt, very clear explanation given. So excellent, I thought, those 2. I found the first call rather disappointing, that it seemed to take an awful long time to get to the point of saying, I'll get somebody to ring you back. And when the person did ring back, the whole thing started again because the health information advisor wasn't aware what the question was. Now, there's nothing worse when I use call centres to feel as though you're just going over and over the same information. There was a minor issue, but I just wondered whether we have a policy on the use of first names. I noticed we dropped immediately into using the individual's first name without asking whether that was appropriate or not. I'm not sure whether that is standard within the service or not.
Our training does encourage staff to seek clarification on the caller's preferred name, how they wish to be addressed, and that's also been discussed in our equal opportunities and ethnicity discussions in the past, where we actually address our callers by their preferred.
It's an interesting point, isn't it? Because it doesn't come very naturally to people to ask, well, how would you like to be addressed? And I remember noticing myself last time we had 2 calls, and the elderly lady was called dear, and the middle-aged man was called sir, and which obviously hit my hot buttons, as you can imagine. There was also, it's interesting, on Trevor's point, there was a really telling point made by Theodore Dalrymple in one of your very recent BMJs, Louisa, where he said, unsolicited use of the first name is not friendliness, it is keeping people in their place. And one might or might not agree with that, but it was a strong statement of something which I think sort of underpins, Trevor, your slight feeling of unease, or perhaps my slight feeling of unease. So that's something we should really keep under review. Yes,
just building on that particular point, is that we do actually ask during our patient satisfaction surveys whether the patient recalled whether they were asked for how they'd like to be addressed, and whether we then went on to address them. And I think from the last survey from memory, it was in the order of 80% of patients do recall being asked how they'd like to be addressed, and for us subsequently to use that method of addressing. So whether we've been unlucky or lucky, as it were, with the calls that we've got here, I don't know, but patients seem to recall it after the event.
Even if it didn't happen?
Even if it didn't happen. Okay. And it's not a major dissatisfier either, so, but...
Okay. Thanks, Trevor. So, I'll sum up in a minute, but Tim?
Yeah, like Trevor, I felt the second pair of calls was better than the first pair of calls, but the second pair of calls, the lady wanted some response about shingles to give to her employer, and that was given. And then she got some more information as well, that she didn't know she wanted, but on balance I thought she needed that extra information. Right. So that was okay. So it went beyond the call of duty, and it took a long time actually, because it was
7 minutes.
It was 4 minutes. The second call was 4 minutes. I think 3 minutes 58, and I made a note of that because the question was answered quite quickly, and then there was a load of other stuff, and I felt on balance that was needed. But I'd look for you clinicians to advise me on that a bit better. The first call, and this is a bit pertinent because I got my letter having passed a certain birthday. This guy had not got a letter that he should have got, and I thought.
Not just to clarify, Tim, not from us.
No, thank you. No, from us. He should have got the letter from his GP practice, or the PCT, or somebody. And I think, did we need 2 calls to tell him that he should have got a letter? Was my first thing, and the second point was, should we have? We knew his postcode, so we knew his GP practice, or we knew his PCT. Shouldn't we have done something with that piece of information? So I felt not totally satisfied with the first pair of calls.
Yeah. Tim, do you want to build on that specifically? Because if so, I'll let you get onto the key.
Okay. Two observations. It's not unusual, I regret to say, for patients to not recall receiving letters.
Sure.
So we can't be sure that there was no letter. The other thing, really on the same subject, is very strange, wasn't it, that the patient went to the GP, correctly identified shouldn't be having bowel screening, and the GP essentially washing his hands of it if that is what has happened. And would the GP wash their hands of it if it cost the GP money to have the guy then call us or 111 or whatever other service there might be out there? And I wonder what feedback loop there might be on that, which is addressing, I guess, a similar issue.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought that I'm going to come in here because I was also interested in that call. Like Trevor, I thought that, and Tim, I thought that the shingles call was just excellent. I felt that the health information advisor correctly mirrored the rather sort of no-nonsense, time is money sort of attitude of the caller. She was calling from work, she didn't want to mess around, it was clear from her tone of voice. Our health information advisor seemed to mirror that back to her, gave her all the information she needed, and the feedback from the patient was very positive. I'm not surprised, I thought it was fantastic. The one before that was much more meandering, slightly less purposeful. There was a lot of ambiguity in what the outcome was, mirrored actually in the paper, because the call ended with the patient being told to ring another telephone number, and then the person didn't receive any information, and our paper seemed to suggest that he should have had some from us. So it was a very messy process, and I suspect that it highlights the difficulties in joining up across the NHS. So the inquiry came to us, which was about some information that this chap should have received from another part of the NHS, and we weren't really very clear about whether he was in fact entitled to screening because it was being rolled out across the country and his area might not have been covered yet. So there's a lot of ambiguity and not very satisfactory, and I felt that was partly to do with us and partly to do with the lack of ability, or the difficulties you have when you have inquiries about other bits of the NHS where we're not really fully up to speed as to what should have happened. Louisa, is this about the same call?
Yeah, well, just because I didn't hear the call, but I still feel I'll just jump in. I suppose that is an interesting point, isn't it? That if we're finding a health information service, should we not know about the rollout of bowel cancer screening and
I think we absolutely should.
And interestingly, the patient actually connected the whole of the NHS as one, didn't distinguish between yeah, absolutely, which area of the service. He was trying to seek screening for bowel cancer, and he'd gone on a very protracted journey to his GP surgery, then to us, and then to another service, NHS service.
There was another peculiarity about the interaction, which was the first call happened to be answered by a nurse who was front-ended, who passed the caller on to a health information advisor, but it's the health information advisor, not the nurse, who started to probe, well, is there actually something you're worried about here? Which I thought was a very good question. Yeah. Is it just that you think you ought to be eligible, or have you got a symptom that you're worried about? And I was wondering why the nurse didn't ask that question. So it seemed to be another slightly odd aspect of that particular interaction. Do you want? No, you're in the queue. You're in the queue. Alan's next in the queue, though. So.
Yeah, I think you've pretty well covered my points on the first call. So just one on the second pair of calls. I take a slightly different view. I think it did go quite fast. It was quite complicated, and I got a slight worry. Did the patient actually understand at the end of the day whether they had understood actually what they'd been advised, and there wasn't any checking back by the person at the end of the call to say, can I just check you've got that right?
Oh, I thought she did.
At the very end, she said. Any other questions?
Yeah.
But she didn't get the patient to confirm back her understanding of what had been said.
Tim, are you talking about this call also?
I'd like to come back on the shingles call now. And that is the thing on the shingles call. I think the advice was fine. The thing on the shingles call which puzzled me was that he was clearly a very IT literate, savvy young person. Why on earth didn't she go online?
Or be advised to go online. She hadn't gone online. She said she'd been to her GP. The chap had gone online in the
and one of the contraception calls had gone, web chats had gone online.
But this would be perfect information to give online, is all I'm saying.
It's interesting. The health information advisor.
How can we get people to
go
do
online?
that?
The health information advisor would have been reading from online resources which are publicly available.
In fact, she mentioned it. HPA says,
exactly,
but she didn't say, why don't you look at the HPA
Exactly, yeah. So,
Nick, you're next in the queue.
Thank you. Just a comment about the demographics, really. The taking of the demographics was ponderous and just took a great deal of time, and I think maybe that's got something to do with the tools that we give our staff, and sometimes it's also the procedures. And I just wanted to contrast that experience of unnecessary minutes worth of people's lives being taken up with this and our web chat. In our web chat, we don't take any demographic details. We're very happy to give out quite complicated information of a clinical nature on web chat, but somehow we've got ourselves into thinking that we can't possibly do that on the phone. And it was just posing that challenge. The second point I wanted to make, which is unrelated, but I'll get in anyway, is I don't actually believe that the outcome of, for example, the second call would have been to go and see the GP under 111. I think it would have been speak to clinician.
I think she would have run the GP.
The person was at work. asking for advice.
If you're going to see a GP,
It says contact her own GP.
It would have said contact if she'd have rang in a 111 service.
Which is speak
So
to.
she's at work. She's been diagnosed by a GP for shingles, but she's now got a question about whether she can attend work, whether she's infectious or whatever. Are we really saying that that patient under 111 would have been told to make an appointment to see their GP? Contact, so speak to on the telephone.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
that's what I thought. So rather than, so if you stand back and say, what does 111 look like compared to what we currently offer in 0845? Answer, in 0845, an initial phone call followed by a call back to give the patient the advice that they need. Under 111, an initial contact with an advice to phone and speak to another clinician or another person in order to get. I mean, they look pretty similar, is what I'm coming to. They look pretty similar.
Except one would have been a higher grade. In 111, you'd have.
Right, you then got how well organised is the out of hours service, because it would have been the out of hours service, speak to clinician. How well organised are they to deal with these kinds of health information calls?
Would you do it in the particular example? This woman's at work, must be in hours.
Yeah.
And so the GP would have tried to get through to her
Right,
GP,
so it
which
would
is
have
a challenge. So it would have taken the patient much more time than the 111 service.
And it would have taken the GP,
111.
GP attention away from things that they could otherwise have been doing.
Although you could argue that the GP should have been on the board in the first place and said, young woman going to work, she's going to want to know. I should have told her. Short-circuited the whole thing.
Anyway, I just make the contrast.
It's very interesting that, though, isn't it? Because it does actually raise the question of health information in a 111 setting.
Yes, it does.
And the value that it does bring.
Ruth, are you trying to join the queue?
I was.
Okay, so I'm next in the queue. I'd like to bring up the first web chat, because I had two particular concerns about this. It didn't waste the person's time by asking them about their demographics. It did, however, waste their time by asking them about all their medicines, before coming to the conclusion that this service is aimed at emergency contraception inquiries. I'm not able to advise you. And that, I thought, was really not good. Followed by, further on in the conversation, please come back to us in the future if you have any other contraception inquiries. So I've got a contraception inquiry. All right, I'll ask you a whole lot of other questions about what medicines you're taking. Then I'll tell you that I'm only able to help you if you've got emergency contraception need. And then I'll tell you if you have any other contraception inquiry, you can come back to that. It's like,
It doesn't stack up, does it?
I thought that was disappointing. Very disappointing.
I'll just add one thing to that. I didn't see anything on the form where you go off to the web chat, an indication that it only deals with emergency.
Fine. So that would be before, Alan, before you got to that there. You've gone through the health and symptom checker in order to get to that end point. So she would have reached that information very early on in the health and symptom check, her journey, that it's only for emergency contraception.
The question I would like to raise is what's the quality review process that we put in place for web chats? So we have a call review process, obviously. What do we do with web chats?
We do a similar process with the online chats. We do a review process using a tool to assess those. What was the inquiry? How was the inquiry met?
Fantastic. You trying to get in before Ruth, because you can fight that one out between you.
I wouldn't dream of.
Ruth, then Renette, then Louisa.
My first point is, and I think we talked about this before, rather than a hypothetical 111 experience, can we actually put the call through and see what happens? So
that's what we are doing, Ruth, but you can't say exactly, because you don't ask the questions, so you use the same scenario going through the process, but you can only say it's hypothetically, that's what the outcome would have been.
My second point was on the shingles one. I felt there was potentially an issue around patient confidentiality, because when she picked up the phone and the caller and said her name, then the NHS Direct health advisor said straight away, "Hi, it's so-and-so from NHS Direct, I'm returning your call," when the lady had actually only given her first name, and there could have been more than one of her working there. It sort of hit me straight away, because I know people are quite precious about these things. The third point is on the demographics. I think it is a difficult balance between cutting the time, but I think in a 111 setting, which is more integrated with urgent care out of hours, then it's likely that clinical commissioners will want to see reporting at GP practice level of patients who contact the service. So I think we don't have a choice.
And PDS will support that in the
Patient
future.
demographic.
Patient demographic service, where it self-populates. The demographic details of our callers will considerably enhance the patient's experience.
Will we get a match?
Yeah.
Brunette, then Louise.
I had just one comment, I suppose, on the web chats. I thought the 2 web chats that we've got here were showing how, when it works well, because I thought the second web chat was good. I think the thing for me is that the first one took 25 minutes, of which there was a 7-minute, what I'd call a research gap. And actually it was during those 7 minutes that the health information advisor realised, I think, that this is not the service that we could offer via the web chat service. So whilst the web chat service is fairly prescriptive in terms of what we've got there, I would suggest between 5:13 and 5:20 was where he or she reached that conclusion. And that's where you start to see the divergence of the sorry, we can't help you, when actually we probably could have, if truth be known, rather than say that we go speak to someone else and go on a telephone method of speaking to the Family Planning Association, which she gives first or he gives first, rather than necessarily going to the online first rather than second. So she'd done the channel switch back to the phone from a online consultation. So I think that's something happened operationally. Probably he or she probably sought advice at that point and realised that they were going down a track they couldn't necessarily complete on this here. Yeah. So but then generally the web chat for the second consultation, there was for me a big gap between the customer, as it calls here, that leaving the session, and then the health information advisor leaving the session. And I'd quite like to know what he or she was doing for 6 minutes, but I wouldn't I? But just generally that the web chats do take. Just wanted to pull out that even a really good web chat, which doesn't seem like that much information is shared, still take longer than a telephone call. And our current model is that we do one web chat at a time, and we have looked at whether we could do multiple web chats at a time, which is what other industries do. There were some concerns raised by our staff as to whether they would get confused between what one patient had to say and another one. That doesn't really matter in the other industries where web chats are used more prevalently.
Okay. Interesting. Louisa, and then I'm going to close it down.
Okay, so I thought that was a very good web chat, and particularly because it's around a specific, sort of quite a common question about a pill. Just had a couple of questions. One was, as you say, even that took, I think, was it
8 minutes?
8 minutes, which feels like sort of quite a long time. But I almost couldn't imagine that phone call getting down to that nub very quickly through our process. You'd have to go through, are you blue or are you, breathing still? And that sort of gets to it very quickly. So I did wonder about the cost effectiveness of that. And then she says, I know you've used the online contraceptive advice tool. I sort of feel bad because I should have looked at that before this. But then she asks her questions again around how old she is and whether she's taking any other tablets, and all standard things that, the St John's warts, and then have you had any vomiting or tinnitus? And I wonder why if that isn't on the contraceptive advice tool, why that is, and why she can't see that.
She can't. She gets a summary of the endpoint that was reached rather than all the questions that were asked before.
Okay. It's a bit frustrating, really.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know our staff find it
then
frustrating.
reduce the time, couldn't
Yeah,
it?
exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone. I mean, I think this is more for us anyway, getting our minds around the kind of service that we're offering to patients and the public. We spent quite a lot of time on it. I'm sure, Trevor's disappeared off to have his flu jab, but we might want to think at the end of the meeting whether that was worthwhile or not. We can now move on to any other business. I have not been notified of any other business for the board today. No. The next meeting of the board will be on the 24th of October. It's going to be first thing in the morning, 10:30, because it goes on. We are then, as a board, going on into our strategy away day. So, if those of us those of us who are watching this online would be kind enough to fill in an evaluation form, that would be very helpful. Thank you. And we look forward to seeing you again at a future meeting. We will now take a short break, and we're going to come back at 2:15. Wildly ahead of time. Thank you.
2 minutes.
3 minutes. Well, okay. 5 minute break.
Yeah.
5 whole minutes.
5 whole minutes.
Even though we're ahead of